This is not my expertise, if you will, but I will give you some universal principles. Number one, seek some type of professional help. Number two, do not suffer in silence. So people who are in abusive relationships, the bullies, or the abusers, they count on your silence. Mm-hmm. And the more silent you are, guess what? The more abused you become.
Hi, Ed. Welcome to the Big
Hello.
and Funny Show. How are you?
I'm doing great, Patricia. How about yourself?
I'm very good. Thank you so much for agreeing to join me in this interview. And you're a very famous man, Ed. You know this.
Well, I don't know how famous, but I am in certain spheres. People know me. Yes.
Yes. But for our friend at home who doesn't know who you are yet, I would like to ensure that they grasp the essence of your phenomenal self. If you allow me, I will introduce you.
Sure, absolutely.
First things first, Ed is a business leader. Since 1998, Ed has been principal of Ed Tate and Associates, LLC, which is a professional development firm that provides keynote presentations and workshops, in-person and do-it-yourself tools and expertise on high-stakes business presentations, how to sell products, services, and yourself. For 14 years, Ed was a very successful national account executive, selling over $500 million in products and services to corporations and entrepreneurs throughout the USA. He co-created 2 business units that produced over $1.25 billion in revenue. Number 2, Ed is an award-winning international speaker. He is the 2000 world champion of public speaking. He is one of the very few certified speaking professionals worldwide. And as of today, he has spoken professionally in all 50 states, 24 countries, and on all 5 continents. Thirdly, Ed is a change management expert. He became the training executive for the Denver Rocky Mountain News, where he established a training department with over 27 programs and 1,100 employee attendees annually. Number 4, finally, and most importantly, Ed is a family man. He is a husband, a loving father of 2, and would like to make the world a better place for them. Okay, I've talked enough. Let's get started.
All right, thank you.
Yes, Ed, I would like to travel back in time, if you allow it, to get a fuller picture of who you are. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself? How were you as a little boy, a teenager, and a young adult?
Well, typically people ask me like how I got started in my speaking journey, and it's related to your question. So you mentioned that you stuttered in our previous conversation, and I too am a stutterer. And as you know, growing up as a kid, and if you stutter, life can be hard. My dad was in the military, and whenever we would travel to a new neighborhood, within days, kids would be making fun of Ed. So one time we're going to be moving back to Chicago to a different neighborhood, and I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. So every day before school and after school, I would read newspapers and magazines out loud just to get better. Then one day I got the idea that kids, they always like to play basketball outdoors. So one day I got the idea, hey, how about I do play-by-play outdoors? So I asked all the kids who their favorite players were, and I literally did play-by-play outdoors as the kids were playing basketball. We moved to the new neighborhood. Guess what? No one knows that Ed's a stutterer. Then I go to a high school, South Shore High School in Chicago, Illinois, and they were at the time one of the few schools that actually had a television studio. So I became a news anchor for my 4 years in high school. And then in college, I went to the University of Illinois. Although I went to the University of Illinois, I did not work for a college-run radio station. I actually got a job at a real radio station that helped me finance my education. And I was the #1 disc jockey on this radio station for a number of years. And from there, I got into the, 17 years in the computer business as an executive. And then I win something called the World Championship of Public Speaking, which we'll talk about a little bit later.
Definitely. Okay, very good.
Mhm.
So basically, so would you consider that you were an insecure boy growing up because of the stuttering, or did you?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, when you stutter and people make fun of you, it makes you very insecure. It makes you very introverted, if you will, and etc. Now, fortunately for me, I had a coach in high school, and it was my incredibly handsome cousin Ricky. We
Oh,
called him Pretty Ricky.
pretty Ricky.
Now, there is a rap star who goes by that moniker today, but my cousin was the original Pretty Ricky. And he literally changed my life. So one day, it's our senior year in high school, and he knew I liked a girl by the name of Lolita Barnes. I'm going to need a minute, Patricia. Okay. Anyway, so one day, like again, we're walking down the hallway. It's in between, I think, second and third period. He says, "Hey, you better hurry up and ask Lolita out, otherwise someone else is going to swoop her up." And I said, she'd never go out with a guy like me. She was at the time she was ranked number 5 out of the 294 seniors, so she was very smart. She was a cheerleader, so she was athletic, and she had just been named prom queen. So she was popular and beautiful. And I said, she'd never go out with a guy like me. And Ricky said to me, he says, let me ask you a couple questions. He says, question number 1, is she going out with you now? I said, no. If you ask her and she says no, will she be going out with you in the future? I said, no. So he says, let me get this straight. She's not going out with you now. And if she says no, she won't be going out with you in the future. Is that correct? I said, that's correct. He says, your circumstances haven't changed, right? Right. But Eddie, if you ask her and she says yes, then everything changes. And the words that he said that stick to me to this day are, don't you say no before they say no. Never tap out. Never take yourself out of the game. And I remember those words to this day. That those words helped me sell that 1.25 billion that we talked about. You in my introduction, helped me sell 500 million in products and services. Whenever I have a big ask, I always have those words in my mind. So anyway, here's what happens. Guess who takes Lolita Barnes?
Pretty Ricky.
Yes, exactly. Okay, you were paying attention. He was really, really pretty. I'm kidding. She said yes, and that was a turning point in my life. First of all, I had a great prom date. Didn't have the confidence to go on the date by myself, so we double dated, me and my cousin with his date, and we had an amazing time. But that was a turning point in my life, and that was the only good advice I ever got from my cousin, Pretty Ricky. Don't you say no before they say no. Never tap out. Never take yourself out of the game.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Actually, my life changed a lot when I found out that, the only answer we get when we don't ask is no.
Yeah.
So go ahead and ask. And okay, so what? You get a no, and then it's a numbers game anyhow. So
exactly. And sometimes no means not right now.
That's
So
correct.
it's not a rejection of you personally. So, and that's what most people don't realize.
That's correct. Oh, yes, fear of rejection is very deep in, in the world. Great. Okay, so that leads me to the next question. So then what prompted you to go visit that first Toastmasters club the first time then?
Okay, so a little backstory. Again, very successful in the computer industry. However, I got fired. And the reason I got fired is I had a brand new boss. He was kind of fudging the numbers, if you will, and we were a publicly held firm. So if Wall Street ever found out that we were kind of fudging the numbers, and he was fudging the numbers to so that he could win some bonuses. Okay, so I take this information to the president of the company. However, I was not very politically astute, and I also didn't have hard proof. This person was very savvy, and it was very, very savvy in terms of finding, kind of hiding the numbers, to be honest with you. And I got fired by him, and it was, I got to tell you, it was tough because I've been with the company for a number of years, etc. However, if you accuse an officer of a crime and you've got no proof, you're going to be fired. As a buddy of mine says, hey, Ed, you specialize in, I think he called it CLM, a career limiting move.
I've never heard that one. I like it.
And this former boss also did a good job of blackballing me in the industry. So I had to leave that industry and actually go into the software industry. And literally I'm starting all over again. And so this company that I was working for, they're saying, hey, there's an organization called Toastmasters. There's a lot of people there. Why don't you go check it out? Well, as it turns out, there's a friend of mine. Her name is Nancy Spurry. She worked at the company I got fired from. She also mentioned that she was going to a Toastmasters meeting. And I said, okay, cool. I'll go with you. I says, when is it? She says, it's Thursday. I said, what time? She says, 7 o'clock. He says, okay, I'll pick you up tomorrow night. She says, it's 7 o'clock in the morning. And I'm saying to myself, what? And I says, it's Toastmasters. 7 o'clock in the morning. These people are drinkers? All right, I'm in. I want to check this out, And I was so disappointed that first meeting. There was like no alcohol served at all. There was no toasting.
Unacceptable.
And I also met a guy by the name of Randall Shelton. Randall Shelton was the founder of that particular club. And after I joined the club, within 6 months, he kept kind of badgering me. He says, hey, there's this thing called the World Championship of Public Speaking. He says, you're really, really good. You need to enter the contest. Now, at the time, I was traveling a great deal, and there was no way that was even possible. Finally, I become the training director for a company called the Denver Rocky Mountain News, which was one of the 2 daily newspapers. No longer traveling. And Randall says, hey, great. You can enter the World Championship of Public Speaking. And I said to myself, great, I can enter this, bloody contest. So here's the conversation I had with Randall. I says, Randall, here's the deal. I'm going to enter this contest once, and after I lose, we'll never have this conversation again. I never lost. And the lesson here is, sometimes you have mentors who could see something in you that you can't even see, in front of your own face. So I'm so grateful to both Nancy and to Randall, because that was truly a life-altering moment in my life.
Yes, it was. It was for me. Your life-altering moment was a life-altering moment for me, because I'm a huge Toastmasters fan. Okay, I just joined in May 2021, and I've binge watched all of the championships in the last few decades.
Oh, wow.
And this leads me to actually one of my next questions. Your World Championship winning speech, one of those days, was such a beautiful message of kindness and compassion. And we need this so much right now in this world, I find. Please, at home, make sure to go watch it. It is truly a masterpiece. May I ask you, Ed, what motivates you to, how do you find your subjects? Because there are a lot of I've seen a lot of your speeches, how to deal with bullies. There is no relationship without trust, pay attention. And you're just, I don't know, like it's always about the same themes, and they really speak to me. So what is it that, where do you draw your inspiration from?
Most of my speeches write themselves. If you pay attention, the speech or the lesson or the message will write itself. For example, my championship speech, one of those days, pretty much from start to finish, that's exactly how it happened. I mean, almost verbatim, if you will. And again, most of these speeches they write themselves. I like messages which are life lessons. I like lessons which are universal. So, for example, like the speeches that you mentioned, you don't have to be an American to relate to the topic or the subject that I talk about. It's universal. You can be from any country, you can be from any background, male, female, it doesn't matter. So I'm always looking for that universal message which has wisdom that improves the condition of the listener. That's what I'm going for. That's what I'm shooting for. I think you asked me previously, what's part of my style? And part of my style is I want to grab and keep the audience's attention. So if you look at those YouTube videos, you'll notice something. And there's a strategy behind what I do. A guy by the name of Bob Pike, he talks about the 3 elements of an opening. They are to break preoccupation, frame the message, and jump into the content. Break preoccupation means grab and keep the audience's attention. No preamble, no pre-ramble. No, hey, I'm happy to be here, none of that stuff. If you notice, almost all my speeches, the action starts right away, okay? Especially the bully speech. Now, the bully speech, be warned, there is, within the first 2 seconds, 1 second, there is some graphic language. And I've given that speech, and I've actually literally had people walk out because they were offended by it. Now, unfortunately, they walked out before they actually heard the whole message. But, be warned, there's some graphic message there. And again, I have a purpose. I have an intention. One of my mentors, his name is Mark Sanborn. He's in the Speaking Hall of Fame. He says, Ed, our job as speakers is not to be liked. Our job as speakers is to provoke, is to change behaviors, to get the people to think. Martin Luther King, who's one of my mentors and who's one of my favorite speakers, and his I Have a Dream speech has been recognized, acknowledged as one of the greatest speeches of all time. You'll notice a couple things. Number one, there was no evaluator after he spoke. Ladies and gentlemen, what did you think about that? No one passed out a survey. Well, was that an 8 or was it a 9? And then what could he have done to make this a 9? There was none of that. In fact, there were many people who threatened his life, etc. And he was trying to change a generation. And some would say he changed generations, if you will. So if, my goal as a speaker, I would like to be liked. And I think everyone wants to be liked. But my goal primarily, I'm very, very clear, is I want to make impact. So that my bully speech, if it offends people, that's not my purpose. That's not my intention. But I understand if you are offended by it. But at the same time, I'm not going to change a word about it. I'm not going to change a thing, because I've had so many people reach out to me about that speech. And I think I've helped a lot of people, not only with that speech, but also all my speeches. I think I've had people just reach out to me and tell me how much my messages have helped them. So with regard to that, that's my goal, is to help people. That's the primary driver, if you will.
Oh, yes. And you do just that. It's actually binge worthy, your content. It is really. I've been bullied but in different ways in my life, and it just speaks to me every time. And anyhow, I really encourage you at home to go watch them all. I will put all the links for you.
Okay.
Make yourself happy. Okay. So in this speaking world, we have this saying, don't speak about it until you can laugh about it. When I tell you this sentence, what comes to mind for you, Ed?
Well, I just recently wrote a blog post about that. So this past August, again, I don't know if we mentioned this. I have children. I have a 2-year-old and I have a 35-year-old. Okay, so you can go with the jokes, if you will. I've heard them all. There's no joke I haven't heard. At my church, my nickname is Abraham. So. But anyway, my son, he's an officer for New York Life Insurance out of Manhattan, New York. He had been invited to a bachelor party, and he attends this bachelor party. One of the participants who attend the bachelor party was binge drinking, and he literally passed out. So my son helps him up, and says, "Hey, let's get some food, let's get you some water, etc." The guy gets a little aggressive with him, and my son says, "Hey, I'm just trying to help you." And, the guy says, "Oh, okay." He kind of settles down. And then my son says, "Well, it's time for me to go." So as he's leaving, this person that he tried to help literally pushes him from behind. I mean, literally tackles him into a wall. They're at a nightclub. At this nightclub, there is a brick wall and there is a metal window seal. And the corner of the window seal punctures my son's ribs, his lung, his spleen. He has internal bleeding. He's critically injured. And as a parent, nothing prepares you for that call. Nothing prepares you for that call whatsoever, especially during COVID. So there's, in New York, there's record COVID cases, etc. And so it was very, very hard. He's doing well today. He's fully recovered. There's a lot of positives came out of it. Number one, his wife Maria, love her, because she was, she fought for her husband. Because again, if you're hospitalized during these COVID days, it's very, very difficult. I mean, no matter how seriously you may be injured, because the hospital staff is they're understaffed and they're overworked, it's sometimes difficult to get attention. And she fought hard. Fast forward to a follow-up. I happened to be with my son when he had a follow-up meeting with the surgeon. And the first thing out of the surgeon's mouth is, boy, he says, like, I've never seen anything like your case ever. And he says, had you waited like another 3 or 4 hours, you could have died. Now, my son knew this. He didn't want to tell me this. You know, he wanted to protect me. But that's how serious it was. So getting back to your original question, you know, don't talk about it until you can laugh about it. That's an aphorism in speaking. So I'm not prepared. You know, this is the first time I've talked about this story in public. I'm not prepared to give this story in a speech because I'm still emotionally connected to it. And I think it'll probably take a couple of years, to be perfectly frank. However, I will say to the thing I'm always processing on is this a story that can help someone else? And once I'm in that place where I feel that this story can help someone else, then I will tell that story. And the thing I don't want to do is I don't want to do therapy on the audience. I've seen other speakers who had some type of trauma and they're doing therapy on the audience. They were not prepared to tell that. They're not healed from it. And I never, ever want to do that. So that's what I mean by, don't talk about it until you can laugh about it. And once it's something that's serious, something that you can, I can add some humor to it. For example, my son and his wife, they came to Las Vegas. I live outside of Las Vegas, and as well as his sister-in-law and their family. So they came out here to celebrate his sister-in-law's 40th birthday. There's about 15 or 20 of us at this dinner table. And I find out later that at least 4 of them are in law enforcement. So David's accident comes up. And all of a sudden, everyone's at the table is just like, David refused to tell us this guy's name. Okay. Because I'm originally from the south side of Chicago. And that guy was going to find out what that meant. Okay. But what's really funny was, like, we had 4 law enforcement officers, and the law enforcement officers say, yeah, he won't tell me this guy's name either. And it seems like they had different plans as well. So everyone was in agreement that something unchristian-like was going to happen to this guy. There was going to be like another unsolved mystery. But my son, we raised him to be Christian. We raised him to turn the other cheek, and he's done exactly that. And thankfully, the person who harmed him has agreed to pay all of his medical expenses and things of that nature. So we decided, we're moving on. We're moving forward. We're not going to live in the past, And so, but some humor came out of that, in terms of like one of the police officers said, like, just give me his name. I will make a call, and that's all you need to know.
I have a very big freezer in my basement.
Exactly. It's like, anyway, but that's the first time I think we as a family actually laughed about it, because, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And because it's all great to be vulnerable and open up, to connect with an audience, because you're a master at engaging with the audience. I find you're like really at the top with that. But for example, for instance, right now I'm in a very tragic family situation as well, and I'm not prepared to talk about it. And for me, like, talking to people like yourself and social media, for me, it's a way out of my current circumstances, on my grief. So I'm definitely not prepared to talk about it. And perhaps in a few, I don't know, hold on, in the future I'll be able to talk about it. But right now it's just too sensitive, and I won't be able to talk about it without getting emotional. And then again, as you said, they're not my therapy. I actually would like to help people and share tools to help them and add value to their life, right? So I just don't want to load all my emotions on a crowd. So I totally relate with this.
Well, the one thing I do, again, that's for an audience. However, talk about it for yourself.
Yes. Okay.
So, talk with professionals, talk with friends, talk with family, because there are, for example, you mentioned Brian Tracy. This is an idea I heard from Brian Tracy. Right. And that is, it's called the Lincoln Letter. So Abraham Lincoln, when he passed away, they were clearing out his belongings from the White House, and they discovered something called the steamer chest. The steamer chest is basically a big footlocker. And in this footlocker, there were like hundreds of letters that were written by Abraham Lincoln. And Mr. Lincoln was not politically correct. And they were directed primarily towards his officers in the Union Army who had made errors in judgment on the battlefield that had caused, hundreds, if not thousands, of deaths. And again, Mr. Lincoln was not politically correct. He wrote his emotions, how he felt. He used profanity, you name it. And then once he got those emotions out on paper, he delivered the letter to the steamer chest. Those words were never spoken to the individual. So one of the things that Abraham Lincoln has a reputation for is that how civilly he treats people. And that was his way of processing it. There's also called a Sedona method of the Lincoln letter. And that is, whatever it is, you write out, the circumstances. And I actually did this recently with my son. I just wrote out to this letter to this person who are my kid. And I was not politically correct. No one will ever see those words. You write it down, and then what you do is day one, you put that letter away. You come back the following day, and then you must read the words out loud. You can't whisper them. You must read them out loud. And if you still feel emotionally charged, you add to the letter. Okay, and then you put it away, and you come back and you repeat that process. Read it out loud. If you don't feel you're complete, add to it, close it, come back until you feel complete. And on the day that you feel complete, you burn the letter. So that's the Sedona method of the Abraham Lincoln letter. And again, that's a Brian Tracy idea.
Yes. Oh, yes. There's so many similar versions. I did a Who Hurt Me kind of list also from Stephen Labossière. He's a motivational speaker. And it was this very similar process, very healing. Because often on the emotions, we just blurt out whatever, right? Like, this is how I'm feeling. They're going to hear a piece of my mind. Support you. But basically, you're just hurting. You're not helping the situation, and you're just adding fuel to the fire, basically. So it's so. I journal. I'm a huge believer in journaling, and I get a lot of stuff out of. Yes, it's so important. But
so I got I got my 2020. This is my 2021 journal, and I just bought a new one that I'm going to be. And if you'll notice, I've got tags here, and I've got different colors, and I draw, and etc. So.
Love it. Yes, get it out so you can come back out and face the world.
Well, that's also where I capture my content as well. So if you have ideas or whatever, never depend on your memory. Always capture it some way.
Always. Some prefer on the phone, but I'm a writer. I prefer to write it by hand. But whatever works, just get it out. Yes, record it. Okay. Which leads me to my next question. If our YouTube friend at home is a victim of abuse, whether it's verbal, psychological, emotional, or physical, and doesn't see a way out of their current situation, what would you like to tell them right now, Ed?
Number one, seek some type of professional help. This is not my expertise, if you will. And again, it's very difficult for me to make a broad recommendation with such a diverse audience because everyone's circumstances are the same. But I will give you some universal principles. Number one, seek some type of professional help. Number two, do not suffer in silence. So people who are in abusive relationships, the bullies, or the abusers, they count on your silence. And the more silent you are, guess what? The more abused you become. I just heard, I was listening to a book. It's called Courage is the Way. Oh man, I can't think of the author's name off the top of my head.
I'll put it in the description. Don't you worry.
Okay. All right. Courage is the Way. So they were talking about Frederick Douglass, who is, an African-American slave who became a great orator. Anyway, Frederick, he initially, he was 17 years old, and he actually beat up his master, and he actually got his freedom, if you will. And this is a story most people don't know. And when he talks about it, I guess in his biography, he says silence is a killer. He says it's the slave who doesn't say anything, who takes the abuse, who gets more abused. The more silent you are, the more you say nothing, the more you're the easier one to abuse. Whereas Frederick, he fought his master. He fought him, and guess what? They never messed with him again. Same thing with Harriet Tubman. Same thing. She fought, her abusers, and they never. So, again, number one, get professional help. Number two, and I'm not suggesting violence. I'm not saying that at all. But number two, do not remain silent. Do not remain silent. Speak up. Let the world know, use shame, not your shame, but shame against your abusers. And I got to tell you, it is a very, very powerful tool.
It is. Yes, absolutely. And if I can, right now, okay, pretend I have a magic wand, okay?
Okay.
And I could magically assemble all the bullies, dead or alive, that you had to deal with into one room. And you'd have a chance to tell them something to help correct their behavior or their children's behavior, because often those types of behavior get transmitted through the next generation. What would you like to tell them, Ed?
I have a speech called Tate's Rules on Bullies, and you can hear how I dealt with 3 specific bully situations. Number 1 is, like I said before, silence. There's this one guy in particular who, continued to bully me. And then, again, I don't want to give the story away, but one day it came to a head and we got into a fight. I did not win the fight. However, I was no longer abused anymore. And one of the reasons, there was a couple reasons for that. Number 1, I fought back. Number 2 is I also spread the word what type of person this was. I told my family about this particular individual, and all of a sudden, I had a lot of people involved. And number 3, I showed them I wasn't scared. So the one thing I would say to all 3 of these bullies is, I'm not scared of you at all. I'm strong, and what I've discovered is, typically, if you're strong, you don't get bullied. Yeah, I mean, I'm not talking about physically. I'm talking about emotionally. I'm talking about psychologically. There's a difference between being fearful and being feared, if you will. And there are certain circumstances. I'm not saying that you can't experience fear. I'm not saying that at all. Okay. However, you don't have to let fear control you. You don't have to let fear paralyze you. And there's, me confronting these guys, especially one guy in particular who's like, twice my size, etc. I just stood my ground. And again, it's not about having a fight with this individual. I use my brain. That's probably the other thing I would tell people as well, with regard to dealing with abusers, is use your brain. Your brain is your most powerful weapon in terms of dealing with abusive situations. You will come up with ideas and solutions to solve your particular circumstances. So going back to your previous question, what should you do? Number 1, get professional help. Number 2, don't stay silent. And number 3, think through this problem. Most people don't take the time to think through their problems. And, you and I, we journal. And what that means is we take the time to coexist with silence, and we take the time to coexist with our thoughts, and we take the time not to be distracted by devices and dial tones and you name it. So but getting back to what I would say to these people is, number 1, I'm not afraid of you. Number 2, in all likelihood, they've probably been abused themselves. So if they're open to it, I would suggest that, they get some type of help as well, as opposed to passing this down to the next generation and the next generation. Again, that depends on their degree of openness. But, if I was in the room with all 3 of these people, zero fear whatsoever, and that's who the person I am today.
Amen to that. Yes. Okay. As we both mentioned, you're the father of a wonderful 2-year-old little queen called Toriel.
Yes.
And you mentioned, speaking of being fearless, you mentioned in an exchange that you want to teach your daughter to grow up to be a strong woman, and that you rather have her be feared rather than be scared.
Yes.
And I thought, those are very strong statements that I totally concur with them. But can you elaborate on why you said that? And can you please share with us how you're raising her to be a powerful and fearless leader?
Okay. So maybe being feared is a bit strong, but I have grown up when I've seen people who've grown up to be scared. And these people, there's a correlation between people who grow up to being scared and people who grow up to be victims. I think the other thing too is sometimes bullies sense if they can pick on you, if you will, or if you can be a victim. However, I've also noticed that people who grow up to be, powerful, strong-willed individuals, etc., and they're rarely picked on. They may be talked about behind their backs, but sometimes people fear them, but they're strong and they're rarely ever like abused in any form. So my time on this earth is limited. I have no, preconceptions about that. And I'm probably not going to be around, for a long time for my daughter. And my goal is to make sure that in my absence, that she can take care of herself, that she's strong, that she's powerful, that, if necessary, if she has to be feared, then so be it. I'd rather have, I want to have a daughter that I have to hold back as opposed to I have to push out. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And I realize that people may not agree with that, but, since I've been the father of a daughter, it has been horrifying to me, the amount of abuse that women suffer. When I raised my son, I, honestly, wasn't as conscious as aware. One of the reasons we're having this conversation is my mom was abused. However, I didn't find this out until after she had passed away. My mom died, over like 20 years ago. And then, after she's passed away, I hear these stories of the things that took place. For example, she was raped. Never knew that. However, my mom, she did suffer mental breakdowns. On a couple occasions, she was institutionalized. Now, as a kid, when your mom goes to a home like this, it's embarrassing, etc. And it's something you don't want to talk about. And again, I'm already being abused because I'm a stutterer. I don't want my, friends knowing that about this. And the environment wasn't as open as it is today. I mean, today there's an open conversation about mental health. There's an open conversation about abuse, etc. And I wish I had been more aware of that then. But again, I didn't know what put my mom in those circumstances. So the reason, again, I am answering your question, and what I mean is I don't want my daughter to be in those circumstances. If someone is in a situation where they attack her, then I want to be able to take care of herself if there's nobody else around, and by any means necessary. So yes. I want her to be super strong. And again, and abuse is not just physical. It's also, I think the most prevalent form of abuse is mental and emotional. So that's something I definitely want her to be strong and to be able to defend herself against that as well.
Absolutely. Well, as I did martial arts for many years and boxing, kickboxing, my daughter too, she's a boxer. She's a tiny little thing. I'm pretty tall, but my daughter's a tiny little, like you could just look at her. It's like on the floor, how short she is, but don't mess with my child. She's been very, very tough. So I'm surrounded by girls. I don't know, I have 4 nieces and I had 2 stepdaughters that I raised as well. So I'm surrounded by women, and I totally understand what you're saying with the fear of like, oh my God, so many things can go wrong. So many things can happen that I would never have to worry about if it was a boy. So yes, go Toriel. I'm going to, yes.
Well, it's not true. You don't have to worry about your boy. Cause like, again, my son was hospitalized this year as well. So we don't think of those in those terms, but we want all of our children to be able to take care of themselves, be it a boy or a girl.
Absolutely. But somehow, I don't know why, but we always feel like men, they're more protected, I find. Don't you find? It's not fair, but I find like there's less bad things happen to men all the time, but I'm just saying it's not the same. We're more exposed, I find, more vulnerable, in my opinion.
Yes. I agree.
Yes. Okay. I know that, so we're going to wrap it up. So just 2 more questions for you. Sure. I know that you have already accomplished so much, Ed. Just to look at your website and my God, I wouldn't even know where to begin with how many tools you offer the world. So technically, you could just sit back, cross your arms, and observe all your executive coaching programs and workshops and keynote addresses or impactful speeches work their magic on the planet. But I would like to ask you, what is the next step for Ed Tate?
Oh, well, Condoleezza Rice once said, I never want to be the ex anything. I never want to be the ex world champion. I never want to be an ex, executive. I never want to be, fill in the blank. And so I'm always working to get better, to improve. So my next area, in terms of my business development, so I started off as a keynote speaker, but today I do executive coaching. I do online programs. I do retreats, I do boot camps, etc. So I have a wide variety of different ways that I support my customers and my clients. And I want to expand that, my offerings in 2022 and moving forward. So one of the areas I really want to, to really get good at is, in the area of YouTube, if you will, just having a bigger YouTube presence, if you will. In terms of, I have certain financial goals that I want to hit for my company. And if I hit those financial goals, I have investment goals that my goal right now over the next 20 years is to make sure that my wife, my son, and my daughter are taken care of financially. So if something happens to me, then, it's my wealth will actually take care of them. Because my mom, I think one of the reasons why she was in circumstances that she was when her and my dad, split up, she was in poverty, so I think she was in circumstances which were dangerous. And I definitely don't want the lifestyle of my wife and my daughter to be disrupted at all. So that's my goal. That's my big goal over the next 20 years, is to make sure that financially they're taken care of. And if anything does happen to me, and again, I'm a realist, then they're taken care of. So that's my number one driver, if you will.
Wonderful. I wish all of that for you. Absolutely. And there's no reason for it not to happen. Absolutely.
Thank you.
And if someone in the audience would like to know more about you or reach out to you, what's the best way to reach you, Ed?
You can go to my website at edtate.com, or you can contact my office at info@edtate.com.
Wonderful. My dear friend, I hope you have enjoyed this discussion that I've just had with Ed right now, and that you got as much out of it as I did. And just to wrap it up, if you're in a situation right now where you feel like you cannot speak up and you're struggling or you're being bullied, what's important is seek help. You're not alone. Okay? Mm-hmm. And do not stay silent. Find somebody to talk to. There's so many resources, whether it's at a church, if you're part of a church, or a therapy, if you're a student, they all have different programs to help. And yes, definitely just find your power. And definitely what I would like to add to that is find your voice and speak up. So you could join a group such as Toastmasters just to visit as an observer, and you'll be able to get the confidence and the empowerment that you need to be able to live your best life, basically, or to reach some certain heights.
Absolutely. I agree. I agree wholeheartedly.
Okay. And any parting words you'd like to share with us, Ed?
No, thank you for, let me, sometimes as a speaker, sometimes we think we get paid by the word. So thank you for letting me, share my ideas and thoughts. And again, this is my first podcast ever where I've talked about my mom. And so that's, I guess enough time has passed that I was prepared to talk about it. So thank you for providing me with this format to talk about, her circumstances and dealing with abusive situations, etc. And again, this is really important to me because I have a 2-year-old daughter, and I don't want her to be in those circumstances. And if she finds herself in those circumstances, I definitely want her to be strong enough not to stay in those circumstances.
Yes. Oh, what a pleasure it has been to talk to you. And thank you for sharing. Thank you for being so open. I really appreciate it. I feel really privileged to have had this time with you. And don't hesitate at home to leave comments below on what impacted you or what moved you the most during this interview. And I will leave you with this: the power of your voice can change the world. Find it and use it. Until next time. Bye.
Thank you, Patricia.
Thank you so much, Ed.